There's a shift that happens in awakened people that nobody talks about. It's not dramatic, it's not announced, but it's unmistakable to anyone paying attention. They stop doing certain things, not through effort or discipline, not because they've decided these habits are wrong, but because something in them has fundamentally changed, and these behaviors simply fall away like leaves from a winter tree. Carl Jung spent decades studying what happens to people during genuine spiritual awakening, and he noticed a pattern. There are specific habits that awakened individuals quietly let go of, not all at once, not consciously, but inevitably. These habits that once seemed essential become impossible to maintain, not because they're trying to be different, because they've become different. Today I'm revealing the 4 habits Jung observed that spiritually awake people silently release. Habits you might be letting go of right now without even realizing it. And if you're still clinging to these patterns, this might be exactly what you need to hear to finally release them. Here's what Jung understood that changes everything. Spiritual awakening isn't about adding new practices or behaviors. It's about things falling away. The awakened person doesn't become someone new. They become less of someone false. And this process of subtraction, of letting go, happens naturally when consciousness reaches a certain depth. Jung called this the natural shedding. Like a snake outgrowing its skin, the awakened psyche outgrows certain patterns. You don't decide to release them. You realize one day they're already gone. You're not doing something you used to do constantly, and you can't even remember when you stopped. The habit simply became incompatible with your consciousness. These aren't small habits. They're foundational patterns that most people build their entire identity around. But awakened individuals quietly, almost imperceptibly, let them go. And in the space left behind, something more authentic emerges. The first habit they release is one most people never even consider giving up. Jung's first observation. Spiritually awake people quietly let go of the need to explain themselves, not through arrogance or dismissiveness, but through a deep knowing that most explanations are futile and unnecessary. Before awakening, you probably felt compelled to justify your choices, why you left that job, why you ended that relationship, why you're living differently, why you believe what you believe. You felt this pressure to make people understand, to get them to see your perspective, to justify your path. But Jung discovered that awakened individuals stop doing this, not because they don't care what others think, but because they've realized that people who are meant to understand will, and people who aren't, won't. No amount of explaining will bridge the consciousness gap. One of Jung's patients described this shift. I used to spend hours trying to explain my spiritual journey to my family, why I meditate, why I left my corporate career, why I see things differently now. Then one day I just stopped. Not from anger or frustration. I just realized I was trying to describe colors to people who could only see in black and white. The explanation was impossible, so I stopped attempting it. This is what Jung meant by the end of justification. The awakened person knows their truth doesn't need defending, their choices don't require approval, their path doesn't need validation. They're living from an internal knowing that external understanding can't add to or diminish. You'll notice awakened people simply state their truth without elaboration. I'm not doing that anymore. No long explanation. This doesn't work for me. No justification. I'm going in a different direction. No defense. The statement stands alone because the truth it represents is complete in itself. But here's what's beautiful. This isn't coldness or disconnection. It's clarity. The awakened person has realized that real connection doesn't require explaining yourself. It happens when someone sees you without needing words. And those who don't see you won't be helped by explanations. Jung observed that the people who stop explaining themselves paradoxically become clearer to those who matter, because they're no longer diluting their truth with justifications. They're simply being, and being speaks louder than any explanation could. But if you think releasing the need to explain yourself is liberating, the second habit awakened people let go of might surprise you, because it's something most spiritual seekers are still desperately clinging to. This is Jung's most counterintuitive insight. Spiritually awake people quietly let go of the addiction to certainty. Not certainty itself, but the desperate need for it. The compulsive clinging to knowing, understanding, having answers. Most spiritual seekers are still hunting for certainty. The right teaching, the correct path, the true answer, the final understanding. They're collecting certainties like armor against the chaos of existence. And they measure their progress by how certain they've become. But Jung discovered something radical. Awakened individuals release this need. They become comfortable not knowing, at peace with uncertainty, at ease with mystery. Not because they've given up on understanding, but because they've realized that certainty is often the enemy of truth. Jung wrote about his own journey. The more I learned, the less certain I became, and I realized this wasn't failure, it was progress. The certainty I'd felt in my youth wasn't wisdom, it was the arrogance of ignorance. True wisdom knows how little it knows. One of Jung's patients, a former philosophy professor, described this transformation. I spent my career being certain about my theories, my interpretations, my understanding of truth. Then I awakened, and all my certainties dissolved. I expected this to feel like losing something. Instead, it felt like finding something, freedom, the burden of needing to know, to be right, to have answers. It just fell away. This is what awakened people understand. Certainty is a false comfort. It's the ego's attempt to create solid ground in a groundless universe. Real peace comes not from having all the answers, but from being okay without them. You'll notice awakened people speak differently. They say, "I don't know," without shame. They hold their beliefs lightly. They're willing to be wrong. They can say maybe without feeling weak. They've traded the prison of certainty for the freedom of not knowing. But here's what Jung emphasized. This isn't wishy-washy relativism. It's not nothing is true. It's my understanding is always partial, always evolving, always open to revision. The awakened person acts decisively while remaining uncertain, commits fully while staying flexible, lives their truth while knowing it might not be the truth. This habit of clinging to certainty falls away naturally because consciousness expands beyond what certainty can contain. You start seeing multiple truths simultaneously, contradictions that are both valid, mysteries that don't need solving, and the need to know gives way to the willingness to wonder. But the third habit awakened people release is perhaps the most painful to let go, because it's a habit that promises connection but actually prevents it. Here's what Jung discovered that most people resist. Spiritually awake people quietly let go of the craving to be understood, not the desire for connection, but the desperate need for others to get them, to comprehend their experience, to truly see who they are. Before awakening, this craving probably ran your life. You needed people to understand your pain, your journey, your transformation, your perspective. You felt incomplete when people didn't grasp what you were experiencing, frustrated when they couldn't see what you saw, lonely because nobody truly understood. But Jung observed that awakened individuals release this need, not because they've become isolated or resigned, but because they've realized that being understood is not only impossible, it's unnecessary. One of Jung's most profound patients described this release. I used to feel desperate for people to understand me, to really get what I'd been through, what I'd discovered, who I'd become. Then during a deep meditation, I realized I don't even fully understand myself. I'm a mystery to myself. How could I expect others to understand me? That expectation was absurd, and the moment I saw its absurdity, it dissolved. This is what Jung meant by the acceptance of essential aloneness. The awakened person understands that consciousness is inherently private. Your inner experience is yours alone, and that's not tragic. It's natural. The loneliness you feel isn't because you're misunderstood. It's the basic condition of being a separate consciousness. You'll notice awakened people stop saying things like, "Nobody understands me," or "I just want someone to get it." Not because people finally understand them, but because they've stopped needing that understanding. They're complete without it. If you're recognizing yourself in these patterns, if you're naturally letting go of explaining yourself, clinging to certainty, or craving to be understood, Jung would say, you're not losing something. You're finding yourself. Before we continue, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Now, this final habit is the one that separates true awakening from spiritual performance. This is Jung's most penetrating insight. Spiritually awake people quietly let go of the habit of proving they're awake, the need to demonstrate their consciousness, showcase their wisdom, signal their spiritual development. This might be the hardest habit to release, because the ego will use spirituality itself as its final defense. Early in awakening, there's often a phase where you need people to know you're awake. You drop spiritual terminology into conversations. You subtly mention your practices. You position yourself as more conscious than others. You're not consciously trying to show off, but you're definitely performing your awakening. Jung called this spiritual inflation, when the ego claims credit for the self's experiences. And he noticed that people stuck in this phase haven't actually awakened. They've just acquired a new identity to perform. But truly awakened individuals let this habit go. They stop talking about their awakening, stop mentioning their practices unless directly asked, stop positioning themselves as spiritually advanced. They become increasingly invisible, increasingly ordinary, increasingly unremarkable. One of Jung's patients and a meditation teacher described this transition. For years, I needed everyone to know I was awake. I'd casually mention my meditation hours, my retreats, my insights. Then something shifted. I realized that needing people to know I was awake meant I wasn't. Real awakening doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need recognition. The moment I stopped trying to prove my consciousness was the moment I actually became conscious. This is what Jung observed. The truly awakened become nearly indistinguishable from ordinary people. They don't have a spiritual aura they're projecting. They're not performing enlightenment. They're just being simply, ordinarily, completely being. You'll notice awakened people rarely discuss their spiritual journey unless asked directly. They don't use spiritual language in regular conversation. They don't signal their consciousness. They've released the need for spiritual identity because they've realized identity itself, even spiritual identity, is another mask. But here's the paradox Jung identified. The less you try to appear awake, the more awake you actually become. Because awakening isn't something you have, it's something you are when you stop trying to be anything at all. The 4 habits spiritually awake people quietly let go of. the need to explain themselves, the addiction to certainty, the craving to be understood, the habit of proving they're awake. Jung would want you to understand. These habits don't fall away through effort. You don't decide to release them and force yourself to stop. They dissolve naturally when consciousness deepens enough that they become impossible to maintain. Like trying to believe in Santa Claus after you've seen your parents putting presents under the tree, you can't unknow what you know. This is why awakened people let go quietly. It's not a loud rejection or dramatic renunciation. It's a gentle falling away. You realize one day you're not doing something you used to do constantly, and you can't even pinpoint when you stopped. The habit simply became incompatible with who you've become. If you're still clinging to these habits, you're not failing, you're in process. Every awakening has its timeline. Be patient with yourself. These patterns will fall away when your consciousness has expanded beyond what they can contain. You can't force it. You can only notice where you're still holding on and bring awareness to why. If you're recognizing that you've already let go of some of these habits, Jung would say, trust the process. Your awakening is unfolding exactly as it needs to. You're not becoming less. You're becoming more yourself by releasing what was never truly you. And if you're still gripping these patterns tightly, that awareness is itself the beginning of release. You can't change what you can't see. Now that you see these habits, they've already begun to loosen their hold. Jung believed that awakening is ultimately a process of subtraction, not addition. You're not becoming something more, you're becoming something less false. And every habit that falls away reveals more of who you actually are, beneath the conditioning, beneath the performance, beneath the need to be anything other than what you are. The awakened life is simpler than you think. It's not about acquiring special states or abilities. It's about releasing the habits that prevent you from being what you already are. Let go quietly, transform silently. Become who you are by ceasing to be who you're not. Subscribe to explore more of Jung's insights on the awakening process. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.